My brother got a new car, paid tuition, and family vacations. All I ever got was, "Stop asking. Life isn't fair." Last week, Dad called me. Not him, asking for $6,000. I said, "Stop asking, Dad. Life isn't fair." My name's Liam. I'm 29, and I recently had one of those moments where life hands you a situation so perfectly ironic that you almost want to frame it and hang it on your wall. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this one's a slow burn, and honestly, the payoff doesn't hit unless you understand the full picture. I grew up in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nice enough neighborhood, decent school district, the kind of place where people mow their lawns on Saturday mornings and wave at each other from their driveways even if they secretly hate each other. My parents are Rick and Diane. Dad worked in commercial insurance. Mom was a dental office manager. Solidly middle class, nothing extravagant, but comfortable. We weren't struggling. That's an important detail for later. Then there's my brother, Caleb, 2 years older than me. And look, I want to be fair here because I'm not one of those people who rewrites history to make themselves the saint. Caleb wasn't a bad kid growing up. He was charming, good-looking, athletic, the kind of guy who walked into a room and people just sort of gravitated toward. He played varsity baseball, had a million friends, dated the homecoming queen, the whole package. And I'm not saying any of that was his fault. Some people just come out of the womb with that energy. Me? I was the quiet one. I liked building things, tinkering with computers, reading books that nobody else in my family cared about. I wasn't antisocial or anything. I had friends. I did fine in school. But I wasn't Caleb. And in my house, not being Caleb was basically a character flaw. It started small. The kind of stuff you don't even notice when you're a kid because you don't have anything to compare it to. Caleb's baseball games were a family event. Both parents in the stands, cooler full of drinks, Dad filming on the camcorder like it was the World Series. My science fair, Mom dropped me off and said she'd pick me up at 4. I won second place that year. I don't think either of them ever asked what my project was about. When Caleb turned 16, Dad took him to a dealership and bought him a used Jeep Cherokee. Not brand new, but solid. Clean. The kind of car a 16-year-old kid dreams about. I remember standing in the driveway watching them pull in, Caleb grinning like he'd just won the lottery, and I thought, okay, cool, so when I turn 16 I'll get something too. That's how it works, right? You do the same thing for both kids. When I turned 16, I got a cake from the grocery store and a $50 gift card to Best Buy. No car. I didn't say anything at first because I figured maybe it was a timing thing. Maybe finances were tighter that year. But a couple months later, I worked up the nerve to ask Dad about it. I said, "Hey, I was wondering if maybe we could look at some used cars. Nothing fancy. I just need something to get to my part-time job." He looked at me like I'd asked him to buy me a yacht. "Liam, we can't just buy cars for everyone. Life isn't fair. You'll figure it out." That was the first time I heard that phrase. It would not be the last. I got a job at a hardware store the summer before junior year and saved up enough to buy a beat-up Honda Civic with 160,000 miles on it. The passenger window didn't roll down, and the AC only worked on Thursdays, apparently, but it was mine. I was proud of it. Dad never said a word about it. Senior year is when the gap really started to show. Caleb had gone to Ohio State. Not on scholarship, mind you. Mom and Dad paid his tuition. All of it. Room and board, meal plan, books, the whole thing. I know this because Mom mentioned it casually at Thanksgiving like it was completely normal. We're so proud of Caleb. He's doing so well at State, and we're happy we can give him this opportunity. Cool. Great. So naturally, when I started looking at colleges, I assumed the same deal was on the table for me. I had better grades than Caleb. I'd scored higher on the SAT. I had a genuine plan. I wanted to study computer science, maybe get into software development. I had a list of schools and I was ready to sit down and talk about it. I brought it up at dinner one Sunday in February. I had a whole folder. Printed out tuition costs, financial aid options, scholarship deadlines. I'd done my homework, literally and figuratively. I slid the folder across the table and said I wanted to talk about college. Dad barely looked at it. He picked up one of the printouts, glanced at the tuition number, and set it back down. "That's a lot of money, Liam." I said I knew that, which is why I'd already applied for scholarships and was looking at financial aid. But I was hoping they could help cover some of the gap, the way they'd done for Caleb. Mom and Dad exchanged one of those looks. You know the one. The married couple look that says we already discussed this without you and we've made our decision. Mom stirred her coffee, and Dad leaned back in his chair. Caleb's situation was different, he said. He needed the support. You've always been more independent. You'll figure it out. There it was again. You'll figure it out. The family motto, but apparently only for me. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. I just sat there for a second, processing the fact that my parents had looked at two children and decided that one of them deserved a paid ride and the other one deserved a pep talk. I picked up my folder, said okay, and went to my room. That night, I applied to every scholarship I could find. I also applied to a community college as a backup, and I told myself that whatever happened, I wasn't going to beg. If they didn't want to invest in me, fine. I'd invest in myself. But here's the part that really stung, and this is something I didn't find out until later. That same year, the year they told me they couldn't afford to help with my tuition, they took Caleb on a family vacation to Cancun. A week-long trip. Resort, flights, the whole 9 yards. I wasn't invited. I didn't even know about it until Caleb posted pictures on Instagram and tagged our parents. When I asked Mom about it, she said it was a graduation gift for Caleb finishing his sophomore year. A graduation gift for completing the second year of a 4-year degree that they were paying for. I didn't know you could graduate from the halfway point, but apparently in my family, you could if your name was Caleb. I started community college that fall, paid for it myself, worked full-time at the hardware store during the day, and took classes at night. It was brutal, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. There were weeks where I slept maybe 4 hours a night. But I kept my grades up, I transferred to a state school after 2 years, and I got my degree in computer science. Took me 5 years total instead of 4, and I had student loans that made my eyes water, but I did it. And the whole time, not once did my parents offer to help. Not once did they ask how my classes were going, or if I needed anything, or if maybe they could throw a couple $100 my way for textbooks. Meanwhile, Caleb graduated from Ohio State debt-free, moved into an apartment that Dad co-signed, and got a car upgrade for his 23rd birthday. I remember sitting in my crappy apartment the night I graduated, eating ramen because that was the budget, and thinking about Caleb in Cancun. About the Jeep. About the tuition. About every single time I'd heard the words, "Life isn't fair," used as an excuse to treat me like I was less than. And I made myself a promise. I was going to build something. Not to prove them wrong, not for revenge, not for their approval. For me. Because if life really isn't fair, then I was going to make sure the unfairness started working in my direction for once. I had no idea how right that promise would turn out to be, or how spectacularly it would come back around. After I graduated, I landed an entry-level developer job at a small tech firm in Cleveland. Nothing glamorous. The office smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams, and my boss was a guy named Todd who thought version control was optional and meetings were a personality trait. But it was a job, and it paid real money, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I kept my head down and worked. I learned everything I could. I took on extra projects, stayed late, taught myself new programming languages on the weekends. Not because I was trying to impress anyone, but because I genuinely loved what I was doing. For the first time, I felt like I was building something that was mine. Meanwhile, the family dynamic hadn't changed. Caleb had gotten a sales job at a car dealership, which he talked about like he was working on Wall Street. Every time I went home for a holiday, dinner conversation was the Caleb show. How many cars he'd sold that month, how his manager loved him, how he was thinking about getting into real estate. Mom and Dad ate it up. Dad would nod along and say things like, "That's my boy," and Mom would beam like Caleb had just cured a disease instead of selling a Honda Accord to a retiree. When I mentioned I'd gotten a promotion at my company, Dad said, "That's nice," and then asked Caleb if he wanted more mashed potatoes. I wish I was exaggerating. I really do. The holidays got worse. Christmas was the real gut punch. I'm sitting in the living room, and we're opening gifts. I'd gotten my parents a nice set of kitchen knives because Mom had been complaining about hers for years. Thoughtful, right? Practical. She opened them, said thank you, and set them aside. Then Caleb opens his gift to them, which was a framed photo of himself. A professional headshot from some photo session he'd done for the dealership in a nice frame. Mom acted like he'd handed her the Mona Lisa. Then it was time for us to open our gifts from Mom and Dad. Caleb got an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000. For the condo down payment, Dad said, clapping him on the shoulder. I got a sweater. From Target. With the price tag still on it. $34.99. I know because the tag was sticking out of the tissue paper and I saw it before I even opened the box. I sat there holding that sweater, and I looked across the room at Caleb holding a $5,000 check, and I had this out-of-body moment where I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity of it had reached a point where crying seemed like too much effort. I didn't say anything. I thanked them for the sweater, and I wore it home that night. But the thing that finally broke something inside me happened the following March. I'd been at my job for about a year and a half, and I'd just gotten another promotion. I was now a mid-level developer making decent money, and I was starting to feel genuinely good about my trajectory. I called Mom on a Wednesday evening, just to chat, and she mentioned that Dad had helped Caleb buy a new truck. Not a used one. A brand new Ford F-150. Dad had put $15,000 toward it. $15,000. I went quiet for a second, and Mom must have sensed something because she said, "Caleb needed reliable transportation for work, Liam. He drives clients around." I said, "He works at a car dealership, Mom. He's literally surrounded by cars." She got that tone. You know the one. The "I don't appreciate your attitude" tone. Your father and I make decisions about our finances as we see fit. Caleb needed help, and we were in a position to give it. Were you in a position to help me when I was working full-time and going to school at night and eating ramen 4 days a week? Long pause. Then, Liam, we've been through this. You were always more capable. You didn't need the same support. I let that sentence sit between us for a moment. More capable. That was the justification. I didn't need help because I was better at surviving without it, which meant the reward for being self-sufficient was getting nothing. The reward for being capable was being ignored. So my punishment for being responsible, I said slowly, is that I don't deserve the same investment as Caleb. That's what you're telling me. Nobody's punishing you. Stop being dramatic. I hung up, not in anger, not with any dramatic final words. I just said, "I have to go, Mom." And I ended the call and sat on my couch in my apartment that I'd paid for with money I'd earned at a job I'd gotten with a degree I'd paid for myself, and I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not sadness, something quieter, something final. I was done asking. I was done hoping. I was done sitting at that table waiting for someone to notice that I existed. That Easter, I didn't go home. Mom texted me asking if I was coming, and I said I had to work. She sent back a frowny face emoji, and that was the end of it. No follow-up call. No, "we miss you." Nothing. Just a yellow circle with a sad mouth and radio silence. I skipped 4th of July too. And Labor Day. I started building a life that had nothing to do with Columbus, Ohio, or Rick and Diane, or Caleb and his shiny truck. I focused on work. I started dating a woman named Harper who I'd met at a friend's barbecue. She was an occupational therapist with a laugh that could fill a room and a complete inability to cook anything without setting off the smoke detector. She was wonderful, but even while I was building this new life, there was a part of me that still carried it. The imbalance, the injustice. It's a weird thing, growing up knowing your parents chose your sibling over you. It doesn't make you angry every day. It's more like a low hum in the background. This constant awareness that the people who were supposed to love you equally made a deliberate, repeated, conscious decision not to. I hadn't talked to Caleb directly in almost a year when he called me out of nowhere on a Thursday night. I almost didn't pick up. "Hey man," he said, all casual, like we talked every week. "What's going on?" "Not much. Working. What's up?" "So listen, I've got this opportunity. Me and a buddy are thinking about opening a sports bar. We've got a location picked out and everything. I just need some startup capital." I could feel where this was going. "Okay. I was wondering if you could lend me like 10 grand. I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it, like the phone itself had personally insulted me. This man, who had received a free education, a free car, a free truck, a condo down payment, and vacations, was calling me for $10,000. "Caleb, I don't have $10,000 to lend you." "Come on, man. You're doing the tech thing. You guys make bank. I'm a mid-level developer paying off student loans. I'm not sitting on a pile of cash." He got quiet for a second, then hit me with, "Dad said you'd probably say no." That one landed. Not because it hurt, but because it confirmed something I'd suspected for a long time. They talked about me. They knew exactly what they were doing. It wasn't obliviousness. It wasn't a blind spot. It was a choice, and they'd all made peace with it. "Dad was right," I said. "Good luck with the bar." I hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Harper found me like that an hour later, still on the couch, still staring. She sat down next to me and didn't say anything for a while. Then she said, "Was it your family?" "Yeah." "You want to talk about it?" "Not yet." She put her head on my shoulder and we just sat there. And I thought, this is what it's supposed to feel like. This is what support actually looks like. Not checks and trucks and vacations. Just someone sitting next to you in the quiet and letting you feel what you need to feel. That night, I made a decision. I was going to stop carrying them around with me like a weight. I was going to let go of the expectation that things would ever be fair, and I was going to pour every ounce of energy I had into the life I was building with Harper. The life that was actually mine. And that's exactly what I did. What I didn't know was that about 2 years later, the universe was going to hand me the most perfectly ironic moment I'd ever experienced. And honestly, I still can't believe it happened. The next 2 years were the hardest and the best of my life, and I know that sounds contradictory, but if you've ever rebuilt yourself from the ground up, you know exactly what I mean. After that phone call with Caleb, something clicked into place. I stopped looking backward. I stopped measuring my life against what they gave him and started measuring it against where I wanted to be. And once I did that, things started moving fast. At work, I'd been quietly developing a reputation as the guy who could fix anything. Broken code, messy architecture, impossible deadlines. Todd, my boss, had left the company by then, replaced by a woman named Claire who actually knew what she was doing. She noticed me in a way my parents never had. After I single-handedly salvaged a project that was 3 weeks behind schedule, she pulled me into her office and said, "Liam, you're too good for this role. I'm recommending you for the senior team." Within 6 months, I was a senior developer. Within a year after that, I was leading a team of 8 people. My salary had nearly doubled from where I'd started, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just getting by. I was getting ahead. But here's the thing about money when you've never had it. You don't blow it. Every dollar felt like a brick I was laying in the foundation of something permanent. I paid off my student loans 14 months ahead of schedule. I built an emergency fund. I started investing, nothing fancy, just index funds and a retirement account, but I was disciplined about it. Harper and I moved in together, split the rent on a nicer apartment, and started saving for a down payment on a house. Harper was thriving too. She'd gotten a promotion at the rehabilitation center where she worked and was thinking about going back for her doctorate. We'd sit at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings with coffee and spreadsheets, planning our future like two people who understood that nobody was going to hand us anything. And honestly, there was something powerful about that. Something bonding. We were a team in the truest sense of the word. I also started doing some freelance work on the side, building websites, small apps, consulting for startups. Nothing that interfered with my day job, but it added up. I was pulling in an extra $15,000 to $20,000 a year just from side projects, and I funneled all of it into savings. By the time I was 27, Harper and I had saved enough for a down payment on a house. Not a mansion, a 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood in a suburb of Cleveland. It needed some work. The kitchen was straight out of 1987 and the basement had the aesthetic of a Cold War bunker, but it was ours. We closed on a Friday afternoon and Harper cried in the driveway, and I'm not too proud to say I got a little misty myself. We spent that whole first weekend painting and ripping up old carpet and eating pizza on the floor because we didn't have furniture yet. And at one point Harper looked at me from across the empty living room, paint in her hair, and said, "We did this. Nobody helped us. We did this." I kissed her forehead and said, "Yeah, we did." My family didn't know about the house. They didn't know about any of it, really. I'd reduced contact to the bare minimum. A text to mom on her birthday, a generic holiday message in the family group chat. That's it. I hadn't been home for Christmas in 2 years. Mom had stopped asking, which told me everything I needed to know about how hard she was trying. Meanwhile, through the grapevine, and by grapevine I mean my cousin Rachel, who was the only family member I still talked to regularly, I was getting updates on Caleb. And the picture was not pretty. The sports bar lasted 11 months before it went under. Turns out Caleb's business partner had a gambling problem and had been skimming money from the register. Caleb lost his entire investment, which, if you're keeping score, was mostly money Dad had given him. After the bar closed, Caleb bounced around a few jobs. Sold insurance for a while, tried real estate, did some kind of vague consulting thing that Rachel said basically meant he sat at home and talked about deals that never materialized. He'd also gone through a breakup. A bad one. His girlfriend of 3 years found out he'd been lying about his finances, telling her he was doing well when he was actually racking up credit card debt, and she left. Rachel said Caleb took it hard, started drinking more, calling mom at all hours, showing up at the house, and just sitting in his old room. And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I felt nothing. He's my brother. Even after everything, there's a part of you that doesn't want to see your own family fall apart. But there was another part of me, a bigger part, that thought, this is what happens when you never learn to stand on your own. When everything is handed to you, you never develop the muscles to carry yourself. And when the handouts stop or the luck runs out, you collapse. Because there's nothing underneath. My parents were struggling too, though I didn't know the full extent of it yet. Dad had taken early retirement the year before, which I'd heard about through Rachel. The pension was apparently smaller than expected, and they'd been dipping into savings to cover the gap. Between helping Caleb with the bar, the truck, the condo, and years of subsidizing his lifestyle, their nest egg had taken some serious hits. The irony was starting to write itself. Around this time, something happened at my job that changed everything. Our company got acquired by a much larger tech firm based in Austin. There was a restructuring period where everyone was nervous about layoffs. But when the dust settled, not only did I keep my job, I got promoted again. The new parent company wanted me to lead a development division. My salary jumped to a number that would have seemed like science fiction to 20-year-old Liam eating ramen in his studio apartment. Harper and I sat on our porch that evening, the porch of the house we'd bought with our own money, and she looked at the offer letter and said, "Liam, is this real?" "Yeah, it's real. You built this. We built this." She shook her head. "No, I mean this specifically. Your career, your skills, everything you've earned. That's you. That's all you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just held her hand and watched the sun go down over our neighborhood and thought about the kid who couldn't afford textbooks. The kid whose parents looked at a folder full of college plans and said, "You'll figure it out." I figured it out. Not because they believed in me, but in spite of the fact that they didn't. Harper and I got engaged that fall. I proposed at this little Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date, and she said yes before I even finished the sentence, which was fine because I was so nervous I'm not sure the sentence was going to be coherent anyway. Her family threw us an engagement party. Her mom made a cake. Her dad shook my hand and said, "Welcome to the family, son." And I had to excuse myself to the bathroom because that word hit me somewhere I wasn't expecting. "Son," said with warmth, said like it meant something. We set a wedding date for the following June. We were paying for everything ourselves, which we were proud of. No strings, no guilt, no leverage. It was ours. I didn't invite my parents to the engagement party. I didn't tell them about the proposal. Rachel knew because Rachel knew everything. But she understood without me having to explain. She just said, "I get it. I'm happy for you, Liam." Life was good, really good. I was making more money than I ever thought possible. I had a partner who loved me, a home, a career, a future. I was 29 years old, and I'd built it all from nothing. And then, on a rainy Monday evening in October, my phone rang. It was Dad. He hadn't called me in over a year. I stared at the screen for 3 full rings before I picked up. "Liam, it's your father." "Hey, Dad. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. It's important." The tone in his voice was different than I'd ever heard. Smaller, uncertain, like a man standing at the edge of something he didn't want to look over. "Okay," I said. "I'm listening." And what he said next was something I'd been waiting my entire life to hear, though I didn't know it until the words were already hanging in the air between us. "Liam, I need to borrow $6,000. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit there because, honestly, I needed a second to make sure I'd heard him correctly. Rick, my father, the man who'd spent my entire childhood telling me that life isn't fair while simultaneously making sure it was as fair as possible for Caleb, was asking me for money. $6,000, I repeated. "Yes, I know it's a lot, but we've got a situation here." He cleared his throat, and I could tell this was physically painful for him. Dad was a proud man, always had been. The kind of guy who'd rather walk 10 miles in the rain than admit he needed a ride. "Your mother needs some dental work done. Insurance isn't covering the full amount, and we're short." "How short?" "About $6,000. We've been dealing with some expenses this year, and things are tighter than expected." I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. $6,000. That was roughly the cost of 1 semester at the community college I'd paid for myself. It was less than the check they'd given Caleb for his condo. It was a fraction of what they'd put toward his truck. It was pocket change compared to the tuition they'd covered for him at Ohio State. What about Caleb? I asked. Have you asked him? Another pause. Longer this time. Caleb's not in a position to help right now. He's going through a rough patch. Caleb's been going through a rough patch for about 5 years, Dad. Liam, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm asking a straightforward question. You've invested probably over $100,000 into Caleb over the years. Cars, tuition, the condo, the truck, the sports bar. Where did all of that go? That's not what this conversation is about. It's exactly what this conversation is about. He got quiet. I could hear Mom in the background, dishes clinking, a TV murmuring. The sounds of the house I grew up in, the house where I'd sat at the dinner table with a folder full of college plans and been told to figure it out. Dad, do you remember when I was 17 and I asked you about helping with college tuition? Liam, do you remember what you said to me? He didn't answer. You said life isn't fair. You said I'd figure it out. So I did. I figured it out. I worked full-time and went to school at night. I ate garbage food and slept 4 hours a night and graduated with debt that took me years to pay off. And the whole time, you were writing checks for Caleb like he was a subscription service. We did what we thought was best at the time. Best for who? More silence. I could feel my heart pounding, but my voice was steady. I wasn't angry, not exactly. It was something else. Something that had been sitting in my chest for over a decade, waiting for exactly this moment to be said. I need to think about this, I told him. I'll call you back. I hung up and sat there for a long time. Harper came home from work about an hour later and found me at the kitchen table with a glass of water I hadn't touched. What happened? She asked, immediately reading my face. I told her everything. The call, the ask, the $6,000. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I love most about her. When I finished, she sat down across from me and said, "What do you want to do?" I don't know. Yes, you do. You just don't know if you're allowed to do it. She was right. She was always right about the stuff that mattered. I want to say no, I said. But not just no. I want him to understand why. I want them both to understand what they did. Harper reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then do that. You don't owe them a cent. But you do owe yourself the conversation you've never gotten to have. I spent the next 3 days thinking about it. I talked to Rachel, who confirmed what I already suspected. Dad and Mom's finances were in rough shape. They'd burned through a significant chunk of their savings helping Caleb over the years, and Dad's pension wasn't stretching the way they'd planned. They weren't destitute. They still had the house, still had some retirement funds, but they were feeling the squeeze. And now they had this dental bill and no cushion to absorb it. Rachel also told me something else. She said Mom had been talking to her sister, my Aunt Patricia, and apparently Mom had said, "Liam's doing well for himself. He can afford it." Just like that. No acknowledgement of how I got here. No recognition of the work, the sacrifice, the years of being overlooked. Just the assumption that because I had money now, it was available to them. Like I was an ATM they'd forgotten to activate until they needed a withdrawal. That was the detail that crystallized everything for me. I also called my buddy Grant, who happened to be an accountant. Not for financial advice, really, but because Grant had a way of cutting through emotional noise and looking at things logically. I told him the whole story, start to finish, and when I was done he said, "Liam, let me make sure I'm understanding this. Your parents spent years investing in your brother, gave you nothing, and now that your brother's broke and you're successful, they're coming to you." That's the gist of it. And the $6,000 is for dental work. That's what Dad said. Have you verified that? I hadn't. Grant suggested I think about that. Not because I shouldn't help if it was genuine, but because a pattern of financial mismanagement and repeated bailouts meant that money had a way of going places it wasn't intended to go in that family. I took Grant's advice and did some quiet checking. I called the dental office where Mom had always gone and asked some general questions about payment plans and insurance coverage. I didn't pretend to be anyone. I just gathered information. Turns out most dental offices, including hers, offered financing plans with zero interest for the first 12 months. So even if the bill was real, they had options that didn't involve calling the son they'd neglected for a decade. The next evening, I made one more call. To Caleb. I hadn't spoken to him since the $10,000 ask over a year ago. He picked up on the fourth ring. "Hey, Liam, what's up?" Same casual tone. Like nothing was wrong and nothing had ever been wrong. "Did Dad tell you he called me asking for money?" Silence. Then, yeah, he mentioned it. "And you're okay with that?" I mean, I'd help if I could, man. I'm just not in a place right now. Caleb, when have you ever been in a place? When have you ever contributed to this family instead of taking from it? He got defensive fast. That's not fair, dude. I've had some bad breaks. You've had every break. You've had breaks the rest of us don't even get to dream about. You just drove them all into the ground. He muttered something I couldn't quite hear and then said, "Look, if you don't want to help Dad, that's on you." "No, that's on you. That's on all of you." I hung up, and for the first time, I wasn't sad or conflicted. I was clear. That weekend, Harper and I took a long walk through our neighborhood. The leaves were turning. The air had that crisp October bite, and the street was quiet. We walked for about a mile before I said, "I'm going to call Dad back tomorrow." "Okay." "I'm going to say no." She nodded. "Are you going to tell him why?" "I'm going to tell him everything. Every Jeep, every tuition check, every vacation, every Target sweater. All of it." Harper squeezed my arm and said, "Good. He needs to hear it, and you need to say it." That night I sat down and wrote notes. Not a script, just bullet points. Things I wanted to make sure I said, things I didn't want to forget in the heat of the moment. Specific instances, specific numbers. The pattern laid out plainly, so there was no room for denial or deflection. I went to bed that night and slept better than I had in weeks. Because the conversation I'd been avoiding for 12 years was finally going to happen. And I was ready. Sunday morning, I poured a cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and called Dad. He picked up on the second ring. "Liam, have you had a chance to think about what we discussed?" "I have," I said, "and we need to talk." "Go ahead," Dad said. I could tell he thought this was going to be a negotiation. Maybe I'd offer $3,000 instead of $6,000, or set up some kind of payment plan. He had no idea what was coming. "Dad, I want you to think back to when I was 17. I came to you with a folder full of college information. Tuition costs, scholarship applications, financial aid breakdowns. I'd done all the research myself. I sat at that kitchen table and asked you and Mom for the same help you'd given Caleb. Do you remember what you told me?" Pause. "Liam, that was a long time ago. It was 12 years ago, and I remember every word. You said we couldn't afford to help everyone. You said I was independent and I'd figure it out. You said life isn't fair. We were doing the best we could." "No, you weren't. You were doing the best you could for Caleb. For me, you were doing nothing. And it wasn't because you couldn't afford it. The same year you told me there was no money for my tuition, you took Caleb to Cancun. You paid for his room and board. You'd already bought him a car. You paid for 4 years at Ohio State. That's not doing the best you can. That's making a choice. And the choice was him. Every single time, the choice was him." I heard Mom's voice in the background. "Rick, what's he saying?" "Put me on speaker," I said. Mom should hear this too. A click, and then the hollow sound of speakerphone. "Liam, what's going on?" Mom asked, her voice tight. "I'm explaining to Dad why I'm not giving him $6,000. And I want to make sure you both hear this clearly, because I've spent 12 years keeping it to myself, and I'm done." Nobody said anything, so I continued. "When I was 16, Caleb got a Jeep. I got a $50 gift card. When I was 18, Caleb got his college paid for. I got told to figure it out. When I was 21, Caleb got a condo down payment. I got a sweater from Target with the price tag still on it. When I was 23, Caleb got a brand new truck. I got nothing. Not even a phone call asking how I was doing. Now wait a minute," Dad started. "I'm not done. You paid for Caleb's bar, which failed. You co-signed his apartment, which he lost. You gave him money every time he stumbled, and he stumbled constantly, because you never let him learn how to walk on his own. Meanwhile, I worked full-time through college, graduated with loans, paid them off myself, built a career myself, bought a house myself. Everything I have, I earned. Not because you helped me, but because you didn't. We always loved you both equally," Mom said, and her voice was shaking. "I believe that you love me, Mom. I do. But love isn't just a feeling. It's what you do. And what you did was choose Caleb. Consistently, repeatedly, for over a decade. You invested in him, and you neglected me. Those are the facts. They're not up for debate because I lived them." The silence on the other end was so heavy I could feel it through the phone. "And now," I said, keeping my voice calm, "Caleb's broke. His businesses failed. His relationships failed. The money you poured into him is gone. And instead of asking him to finally stand on his own 2 feet, you're calling me. The son who never got a dime. The son who figured it out. And you're asking me for $6,000. Liam, your mother needs dental work. This isn't about the past. It's entirely about the past, Dad. Because the past is why you're in this position. You spent your savings propping up Caleb for 20 years, and now the bill has come due and you've got nothing left. That's not my fault. That's not my responsibility. And it's not my problem to solve. Dad's voice changed. Got harder. So you're going to let your mother suffer because you're angry about things that happened when you were a kid? Mom's dental office offers a 12-month zero-interest payment plan. I checked. She has options. What I don't have is an obligation to be your emergency fund after a lifetime of being your afterthought. Mom started crying. Quietly, the way she does when she's trying to hold it together. And I'd be lying if I said it didn't affect me. It did. She's still my mother. But I thought about all the times I could have used someone to cry for me, and nobody was there. I want to ask you both something, I said. And I want an honest answer. Why? Why did you treat us differently? What did I do wrong? Long silence. Then Dad said something I don't think he'd ever said out loud before. Caleb needed more. He was always struggling. Academically, socially, you name it. You were always fine. You were smart. You were driven. You handled things. We just thought you didn't need us the same way. Every kid needs their parents, Dad. I wasn't fine. I was alone. There's a difference. I heard him exhale, long and slow. Mom was still crying. I'm not saying this to punish you, I continued. I'm not doing this out of spite. I'm saying no because I have to. Because if I say yes, nothing changes. You'll keep enabling Caleb and ignoring me until the next crisis, and then you'll call again. And I refuse to be the safety net for a family that never caught me when I fell. More silence. Then Mom said, voice cracking, "Are you saying we've lost you? You lost me a long time ago, Mom. You just didn't notice because you weren't looking." I told them I had to go. Dad said, "Liam, wait." But I'd said what I needed to say, and staying on the line wasn't going to help anyone. I told them I loved them, because I did, and I hung up. I sat on that porch for a long time after. Harper came out with a blanket and 2 cups of coffee and sat next to me without saying a word. We watched the clouds move across a gray October sky, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Not satisfaction, not vindication, relief. Like I'd been holding a boulder over my head for 12 years, and I'd finally set it down. The aftermath played out over the following weeks. Rachel told me Mom had been crying a lot, and Dad had been quiet. Not angry, just quiet. Caleb was furious. He called Rachel and said I was selfish and petty, which was rich coming from a man who'd never once offered to help anyone but himself. Rachel told him the truth, that I was right, that the favoritism was real, and that if he had any self-awareness at all, he'd be ashamed instead of angry. Mom eventually got the dental work done through the payment plan. Turns out they managed just fine without my $6,000. Funny how that works. About a month later, I got a letter. Not a text, not an email. A handwritten letter from Dad. It was short. 3 paragraphs. He said he'd been thinking a lot about what I'd said. He said he didn't realize how bad it had been from my perspective. He said he was sorry. No excuses, no deflections, no, but we thought qualifiers. Just an apology. I read it twice. Then I put it in a drawer and I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing him, but because I wasn't ready. Forgiveness isn't something you owe someone on their timeline. It's something you give when you're healed enough to mean it. And I wasn't there yet. Harper and I got married that following June. Small ceremony, 50 people, mostly her family and our friends. Rachel came and cried happy tears. My parents weren't invited. Maybe someday that door opens. But it opens on my terms, at my pace, when and if I decide I want it to. Caleb never reached out. Not to apologize, not to congratulate me on the wedding, not for anything. That told me everything I needed to know. As for me, I'm doing great. I got promoted again last spring, and I'm now leading one of the largest development teams in my division. Harper finished her doctorate and started a private practice. We're talking about having kids in the next couple of years, and I already know what kind of parent I'm going to be. The kind who shows up for every science fair. The kind who invests equally. The kind who never tells a child to just figure it out. I think about what Dad said to me all those years ago. Life isn't fair. And he's right, it isn't. But sometimes, when you've worked hard enough and long enough and refuse to let the unfairness define you, life has a way of handing you a moment that balances the scales. My moment was sitting on a porch in a house I bought, next to a woman who chose me, building a future nobody can take away, and finally having the strength to say the words my father said to me 100 times. Stop asking, Dad. Life isn't fair. And I figured it out just fine.